Good evening, folks. Episode 51 of the SMB Talks. Don't worry about me laughing because last week I made a biggest blunder of the show. Episode 50, I was supposed to have an amazing episode with Andrew and Pete, and my system conked. So it was such an embarrassing moment. They were live. I am live, and I can't see them. They can't see me. Total waste. So I have blocked episode 50. Episode 50, I'm keeping it alive. They have promised me they will be coming back, and I will be doing episode 50 even if it is after episode 150. So thank you so much. So episode 51, I wanted to bring some special person who can talk about communication, right? So it's very difficult for people to take an hour out of their time and come on the show. So I asked around several people, and one of my favorite people, was so graceful to come on the show. So let me introduce her before I bring her on. She is none other than Beki Winchel. She is a learning content and research developer at PCMA, the world's largest network of business event strategists. She is a freelance writer and PR, social media, and content consultant. Previously, she was manager of strategic programming at Reagan Communications, and before that, editor of Reagan's PR Daily, one of the largest publications for PR and communications pro. By now, you can figure it out. She is a pro when it comes to communications, public relations, and all those things. Becky is the co-host of the Becoming Allies and Midnight Showing podcast, a social media audience trends and pop culture nerd, and the spokesperson for our Bassathon, Sir Tibbles Waddlesworth. So this is another hidden reason why I invited her, because I am a huge fan of Tibbles. Tibbles is, if you're not following Tibbles on social media, you're missing out a big deal. So go check Tibbles out. She's an expat living in Sweden with a Wisconsin accent and love for the Green Bay Packers, Disney, Harry Potter, and parks and recreation. So without further ado, let me bring her on. Hey, Becky.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I have to check it because last week was a total embarrassment for me, and so it was really embarrassing, really embarrassing. So thank you so much for taking time and joining me today. I'm so happy to finally see you in person and have the session with you. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you? I could say the same about you. It's great to see you and finally have a conversation with you.
Fantastic. Before we proceed, I have two questions. How is Dennis and how is Tibbs?
They're both doing well. I mean, it's Friday, so I feel not much can go wrong on a Friday. I say as people are starting their Friday, so I hope I didn't jinx anyone. They're currently on a walk right now. We might see them walk in a little bit later, but they'll be back in a little bit, and it's good.
Fantastic. All right. So Becky, just to give a background, I started this show when COVID hit all of us. So the purpose of this show is to bring on people like you who have immense amount of experience in your particular area, ask you questions about your journey, some insights about that field of study or work, and get some insights for people who are watching. It goes on my YouTube channel later so that people can get insights later as well. So I have curated a set of 10 to 11 questions for you on communications and PR, etc. So if you're ready, we can start.
Definitely. I want to say one thing before you start, though.
Sure.
I don't think you should be embarrassed for any technical difficulties. I'm a big fan of saying tech is great until it doesn't work. And I also just want to pan down. My shirt says you're on mute, which I feel is very appropriate for this day and age. So right. I'm with you. Everybody has those problems, right?
I think I should get that T-shirt, because one of my team members, I have a very small team. He is always on mute and he keeps talking. It's so funny to watch. I let him speak for 2 minutes, then I'll say, Danish, you're on mute. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's so funny. I should get that T-shirt actually. Thank you so much.
The most common phrase.
Absolutely. You're on mute. For last 1 year, we have been telling the same thing again and again.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into communications, right? So communications and PR is your forte. You have been doing it for several years and you're pretty successful in that. So first question is, communications is probably the most critical piece for every small and medium business startup today, Why do you think? Can you share your thoughts why communications hold a special place today?
Yeah, so I want to start. I looked up the definition. I always feel this is like the bad sign of a talk, but I promise it's not going to be like one of those. I looked up the etymology of this word, even though I'm a word nerd. But the Public Relations Society of America defines PR, because this is important, as the strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. And I feel like that I wanted to share that because it's such a great, summation in a few words of what PR is, but also
Right,
communications. And that's
right,
just one part, right? The public relations is only one part of the whole strategic communications umbrella. So, I mean, there's executive, there's internal, employee, media relations, employer branding,
right,
storytelling, crisis comms, all of this. And
right,
especially too with social media and content, the lines between marketing and communications are getting blurred. And
right,
so depending, companies all over across industries, they might have different setups, and they might have, their social media or their digital teams or overall content teams under communications, or sometimes liaison, like,
right,
partnering with them. And sometimes you'll have communications partnering with HR, with DE&I. No matter what the process is and the organization structure, basically the communicator within your workplace and your business is the center of your business, because that person connects with every other person. The communicator is the one who is supposed to really see how this initiative fits across teams, and they're kind
right.
of the bridge and the connector above all. And so that's really like they take the goals and the vision of the company, and then they look at, like, okay, is that matching how we're presenting ourselves, both to our employees and both externally. So I think if you,
Right.
like, picture the communicator as the great connector, that's
Right.
that's a good way of looking at it.
Right, right, absolutely. Because one of the saddest truths about communication part is when people talk about PR, it ends at press releases. People think press releases is PR. That's the saddest part. But there is a lot which goes into communication, corporate communications, PR, all those things. A lot of things happen on the backstage. People don't know really the value of a communication department in any organization for that matter. So that answer sums it up correctly. All right. So another thing I wanted to ask is communication can take various forms and shapes, be it external or internal. So let's talk about internal. How important is internal communication?
And I love that, because I just, just as you just said, that PR isn't just press releases, like that's just
Right,
one little thing that comes out of PR, right? Like one of
right,
very many things. It's the same is true of internal communications, right? Like the intranet, or, the employee newsletter is just one little tiny thing that comes out of internal communications. And what
right,
I love too is, with everything that's been happening over the past almost 2 years, and the future of work, and it dramatically shifting, like we're talking about, seismic changes within the workplace, that now we're looking towards an entirely new future, and current,
right,
the current landscape is now this hybrid. We've proven that remote work works, that we can now communicate much better, with some people inside of the office, some people outside of the office, with everybody remote, all of this stuff. But with
right,
all of this happening, internal communicators are now in the spotlight, because things like culture, and in the employee experience, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even executive communications, all of that, and talent recruitment, as people start struggling, because we're talking about like a huge talent migration, right? People are leaving their
right,
jobs, they're finding new jobs, they're like situating their priorities. And with all of that, the internal communicator is really like coming into the spotlight. They've always been important, but I think
right,
they've always been relegated to the background.
right,
And there's a couple of things that I like to say. First of all, like with training and procedures and collaboration, which is a huge part, right? Even for like startups and for small businesses, right? When you're getting people to collaborate, especially across maybe time zones and, places,
right,
that's not your IT person's job. That's the internal communicator's job, to set everybody up, to onboard, to be able to set those processes, to set kind of that solid, to work with IT to get that going and to communicate properly. And the
right,
other major thing too is that especially as we struggle ourselves with like mental health and wellness, as we struggle with like being burned out, managers on a whole, or for startups, like, it's the owner, the founder, right, the CEO, it's hard to talk to employees about these things. And internal communications and employee experience people can help us have those difficult but very necessary conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely. The pandemic has showed us that how important communications is. Internal employee experience teams, employee relations teams, all that they have. The spotlight suddenly came onto them. They were always doing the work, but suddenly everybody realized they do much more than what right? So that's one of the good things which came out. Right. Moving on, building a communication strategy. It's of paramount importance for every organization. Why there should be a communication strategy? Why is it super critical to start with?
I would say that building a communication strategy is just as important as building a business strategy. You don't want to start your business without, a business canvas, without, like making sure that you have a strategy with outline goals and objectives, with, your consumer personas, your vision, your mission, all of that sort of stuff, and a plan to market, a plan to, redefine your value, all of that sort of stuff. And in the same way, you want to do your strategic communications plan just like that, because it's going to tie your overall comms, whether that's your marketing, your advertising, your PR, right, your social media, everything. It's going to tie it to your business goals and your objective. So what it does when you have a strategic communications plan is it makes sure that whatever you're doing to promote or build those relationships and like partner with people are aligned with what you're doing in the business, because everything should be leading to the bottom line at the end, right? Whether that is like this bottom line, like the money bottom line, or the bottom line of your purpose, right? And so it's kind of like having a schematic blueprint, right, for a house. And I envision, that business plan, and then right on top of it, that strategic communication plan is like the foundation. And when you don't have it, that's when you start having these kind of crazy, like one-off, like, we're going to send a press release. Well, why? Or we're going to spend all this money, on this influencer doing X, Y, and Z, but we don't see results. So a strategic communications plan can help make sure you're not wasting money, and can really help you power what you're creating from a business sense as well.
Right. I love that when you said that it's as important as a business strategy plan. That's very nice. Right. So if an SMB or startup wants to build a cohesive communication strategy, what are some of the starting points, or what are the ideal baby steps you recommend? Because you would have prepared so many strategies in your career. What are the basic steps which these companies need to take care of?
So I would say, first, there's the kind of the model that starts, similar to business canvas, where you start, with your goal, and again, you connect it to your business and its bottom line. So if they're not aligned, you're already in trouble. So you set a goal that makes sense according to the business. Then you kind of break it down into some measurable objectives, those kind of SMART, right? The specific, measurable, time sensitive, those kind of realistic goals and objectives. Like, we're going to increase sales by X amount of percent, within 6 months, or we're going to get this much website traffic or this many business leads through doing this strategy. And then what you want to do is you select the people that are going to help fulfill those objectives. And those are, in the PR world, what we call your target publics. Marketing, it would be like your target customer, right? Who you want to target your messages to. And then you build out your messages and your strategies and tactics, and that is where the press release doesn't even come down, if you're going to do it, until way down at the end, like when you're thinking of tactics and channels, or like a Facebook post, right? That comes down at the end. The only other thing I would say is that if you're a small to medium-sized business owner or startup owner, and you have already created customer personas, if you have that's another way of looking at it, and it's equally great, where then you want to look at that persona, those personas, I should say, and you really want to drill down into what their specific needs are. You kind of look at it in two different ways. What are they asking for? And then kind of that Apple type approach of what do they need but they're not asking for, right? And so
Right.
you look at both of those and you start to then build your goals and your objectives and everything based on that. So it's either an audience first or a goals and objectives first and find the audience to meet them. But either
Right.
way, all that fun stuff doesn't happen until you set kind of that foundation and that
Right.
outline, and then you get to do all the fun stuff of where do we reach them, like what messages do they care about, that kind of stuff.
Right, right. It sounds more work than preparing a marketing strategy, actually. I was not even aware of that. Fantastic. Thank God I'm not a PR person. All right. So, talking about PR, PR is an important piece of the communication puzzle for every organization. Can you share your top 3 advice on how to earn PR for your SMBs and startups? Why I ask earn is because when you start up or when you are a small and medium business, you may not have all the money to go out and publish in Forbes.com or entrepreneur.com. So how can you earn PR? What are your top 3 advice?
Yeah. So before I jump in, so I have like 3 like kind of like quick tips, but also I would advise everybody listening to check out the Peso model. So that's what we use in PR. It's PESO. So it
Okay.
stands for paid. That's what you were just talking about, right? Paying
Right,
to be in
right.
Forbes or Inc.
Yeah.
There's the E is the earned. That's what we're going to talk about in a second.
Right.
Then there is the sponsored, which is a little bit different. Then there is going to be, well, actually the sponsored is more of like the Forbes. Paid is more of like, this is an advertisement. This is
Right,
like
right.
really what we have. There's a little bit of Venn diagram crossover there. And then
Right.
owned. And that ties into my first point. My first
Right.
tip is to embrace what we call in the PR world as brand journalism. That could be sponsored content. That could be owned content. Ultimately, it should be your own, because
Right.
what you're creating and repurposing, I think it's crucial if you're going to create something. So for example, if it's a webinar or a live stream or a video or an interview, thinking about ways that you could chop it up. Maybe you can make an infographic of this, like the top 3 ways to get
Right.
PR for your business, or getting the transcript down and creating like little video clips, all those different things, because then you can work smarter and not harder. But the
Right.
big thing that you have to do is tell your own story and find ways to do that on your website, perhaps through a blog, on your own social media, so that you can start there and you don't have to just keep going after journalists, so you can
Right.
build your own presence. The
Right.
second is to collaborate and partner with others. And that could include, if you have a somewhat larger and kind of rocking and rolling where you have some departments or some, people within your startup, you can partner with them to, kind of align on some projects, to get that PR going as well, but also fulfill
Right.
what they're looking for, or
Right.
other organizations and industries. That helps you be able to innovate solutions. But then, especially now, as COVID continues, that partnership, like sharing resources, sharing perhaps even promotions and stuff like that, is hugely powerful. And the wonderful thing is, startups can use it, but also it can be used to revitalize brands.
Right.
Look at like Crocs, right? And Crocs
Yeah.
were like, it was really big, like in the early 2000s, and then it was like, ugh, nobody wants to wear those. And they have experienced this whole kind of like brand renaissance. Why? Because they partner with people and they have these collabs, right? McDonald's is doing it right now with their meals, and they're
Right.
partnering with influencers to have, like this, like, I'm gonna date myself right now because I don't know hardly any of them. They're like, this TikTok star like has, this special meal at McDonald's. Let's be honest, it's the same meal that you can order off the menu, but they've
Right.
done that kind of partnership to revitalize that and to get people interested. And
Right.
then that falls into the third, is make a splash, right?
Right.
And you don't want to make a splash of like being too annoying, but you want to do something out of the ordinary, right? Take a little bit of a risk. but you want to be real. So I know that like everybody looks at Wendy's as like the gold standard on social media. And
Right.
years ago, they kind of perfected the art of being snarky and standing out and grabbing attention. And I
Right.
think now you look at somebody like Steakum, right? And you look at Alan Bott Communication, who runs, the Steakum account and a lot of other food and restaurant brands, and their ability to kind of break through and seize those little opportunities and also surprise people. I think when Nathan Allenbeck started tweeting, all about misinformation under the Steakum account, everybody was like, what is happening? And here it's gotten this huge amount of press and this huge amount of like footprint and brand exposure for a
Right.
frozen meat product that sits in your grocery store that not so many people knew about before, but now they're noticing when they go through the grocery
Right.
aisle. So
Right.
the element of surprises is big.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. All right, another thing which I want to talk about PR is, when it comes to PR, getting the attention of the right journalist or the media outlet is critical. We all do our pitches and all that, but most of them goes to, their spam or whatever it is. What are your thoughts on how SMB owners or startup founders get the attention of the right journalist or the right media outlet? What can they do?
Definitely. So the first thing I would say is like the understanding that it's not about you. It's never about you. And that's a hard and tough pill to swallow, but it's not about you. And so once you can get that understood, then I think
Right.
there's already a better chance of like having success, because journalists don't care about that. They care about what their readers are going to care about, right? What's going to
Right.
get their readers to click. Especially now, you have to think newsrooms are getting smaller and smaller, and everybody is fighting for revenue. They're fighting for clicks. There's all this content that's free, and newsrooms and newspapers, digital or print, are struggling to survive. I mean,
Right.
print's all but dead. So like digital's even struggling to survive. So they don't care about you. They care about what's in it for them, which is the other thing. Tell them what's in it for them immediately. Like, you don't have to do a long pitch. You don't have to do, paragraphs of an email. I'm very verbose. And so, that's not something you want to do in a pitch to somebody. You want to be like almost like an elevator pitch, right?
Right, right.
A startup, you wouldn't pitch to a venture capitalist in half an hour. You do it in like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, right? Or
Right.
2 minutes, that like elevator pitch. And you want to get that down in the same way for a journalist. And that's not saying something like, oh, your readers are going to want to hear about this, or your readers will love it. Don't say that. Show it to them. Show it to them by like giving them a juicy story or giving them this like really cool data point, and then seeing like this whole new angle on something that they've written. And that falls into the other two, which is 1, do your research, and 2, build relationships. And that goes along with PR, right? So
Right.
build relationships is all about, the good PR and media relations pros are building relationships with journalists, long-lasting relationships in which you're reaching out long before you even ask them for anything. And you're starting to read what they write. You understand their publication. You understand what beat they have in the publication. Right. You retweet their stories. You know what trends have been hit and what hasn't been hit yet, so you can propose a new story. And because everybody loves a scoop. And then secondly, with that is do your research. So you have to find the right outlet, find the right journalist, right? And there's a lot, even on Twitter, most publications, broadcast or, print like digital. So for example, CNN, the New York Times, The Verge, everything like that will often have Twitter lists of their staff. And a lot of them will have the journalist right on there, right? Or the broadcasters or the correspondents. And within those, a lot of times within their Twitter bios, they'll have, if they have a Signal, they have WhatsApp, if they prefer to be DM'd, if their DMs are open, if they want an email, what they're looking for, that's all there. And if you do your research, you can find it. And so when you start to, go to them in the ways that they want to be reached and give them the stuff that they're asking for, that's when the magic happens.
Right. Actually, when you mentioned that, when the research part is very critical here, if the information is out there, but you have to really do your research to find out the right journalist, the right publication, the right stories, where your brand story can fit in. All that takes time, so you have to spend time there. That's a very fantastic answer. So one of the reasons I wanted to ask you to be on this show is because I recently read uh, I was on your Twitter timeline. I was reading what you're talking about, and one thing which caught my attention was purpose-driven communications. You've been talking about it for a while, so I wanted to. You're a big proponent of that. So I wanted to understand what does that even mean. Number one, and number two, why is it so important?
Yeah, definitely. So purpose-driven communications are huge. They're the communications and the strategies that power your organization to also make the world a better place. And that sounds a little like kumbaya, but it's very important right now. And so
Right.
it can happen in a variety of ways. It can be, sustainability. If that's, fighting climate change, building sustainable solutions. It's taking a stand for things that matter. And when I say things that matter, like social justice, racial equity, speaking out against the systems that exclude and even laws that aren't inclusive and can damage society as a whole. So you look at brands like Ben and Jerry's, standing out in the days after, the murder of George Floyd and standing against white supremacy. You look at companies like Nike and, P&G and making those big stands. Mattel making a lot of those stands. Companies now that are starting to stand, and even CEOs speaking out against, the recent regulations passed in Texas that are being
Right.
repealed, and that's sparking a hot debate. All
Right.
of that. It also includes helping to dismantle the systemic racism and bigotry that is abundant, especially in the US, but throughout the world,
Right.
through meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. And so one of the things with that is I would recommend listening to Janet Stovall. She shares a lot of fantastic information on LinkedIn. She also has a really wonderful TED Talk that I think is called the Business Case for diversity and inclusion. And in 2018, she said that ethically diverse companies perform 33% better than the norm, and Forbes Best Workplaces for Diversity have a 24% higher revenue group. And that was in 2018. So I can just tell you that the numbers have completely exploded since then. And that is an old number. It's like compounded exponentially. So the other thing too is Edelman has a wonderful trust barometer that they do every year, and they sometimes will do special reports as well. They did a lot during 2020. And in their 2021 trust barometer, they revealed that for the first time ever in history, businesses now have become the only trusted institution. They are now seen by consumers as more competent and ethical than government organizations, media outlets, and non-government organizations, so NGOs. So 86% of customers expect CEOs to publicly speak out on societal issues or community issues and ways that the COVID-19 impact is affecting us. And 68% think CEOs should step in when the government doesn't. And so really what's happening is what used to be a risk is now seen as a reward. And in the PR world, it used to be a risk of, stay silent, stay in your lane. Businesses don't want to talk about this. And it's completely flipped. Like it was growing over the past several years. But I can just tell you now that in 2021, and we're facing 2022, it is now a detriment if you don't speak out. And the wonderful thing is, I was thinking about this in a startup mind. And I went back, so I was like, I remember a talk by Guy Kawasaki, and I was like, I feel like that was a really long time ago. And I looked, and it was a 2004. My gosh, I can't even say dates anymore. 2004 presentation that Guy Kawasaki did at Stanford University. And he was talking about the core of entrepreneurship, right? Like the core startup mentality. And this is what he said. He said, my naive and romantic belief is that if you make meaning, you will probably make money. But if you set out to make money, you will probably not make meaning and you won't make money. This was in 2004, and I can tell you that that belief is not naive and it is not just romantic. It is
Right.
now a reality, and like making meaning is now tied intrinsically, and it will be forever tied to making money. And that's why
Right.
it's so important.
Right. Right. I love Guy Kawasaki to by every hair on my body or every cell of my body, and he's one of my wish list guest on the show. One day he should come on the show. That's I have
Wonderful.
put my affirmations into the universe. Let the universe do it. So
That's
I'm
your
in that
goal.
way.
Your
Yeah, that's
steps are
my
leading up to Guy Kawasaki. I like
yeah.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
That's a good goal.
He's fantastic. He's fantastic. I have watched that talk of his. It's a very simple, very old video, and the way he has spoken as every speech of his, it's amazing. Right.
Yeah.
So let's one another question on this purpose-driven communication. Mark Schaefer came on the show, and he was mentioning the same point about brands taking a stand. He mentioned one interesting point, which I was watching last week, is that it's not for everybody. Because these days brands are taking it as a marketing gimmick to take up causes, to stand behind and make get some mileage out of it. So I want to pick your brain on this. How can SMBs and startups adopt purpose-driven communication approach? What is your advice on that?
I definitely I agree with Mark that it isn't for everybody in the sense of what you want to avoid is like that virtue signaling, right?
Right.
And like what really cut me is seeing, especially in 2020 and then this year, is seeing members of the Black community especially respond to brands that have done things, like they put their black box up and they were like, here are our hashtags and our messages, and we're going to do better, and then nothing really happened and they didn't show any receipts. And the big thing that I kept hearing, especially on Twitter, is I don't need your black box and I don't need your statement and I don't need like a day. What I need is a job, and what I need is the ability to go to the executive level, and what I need is more opportunities to thrive. And
Right.
so I agree with him in the sense of like, it's not for everybody. Like, don't just go out there and be like, woo, like we're all about purpose, especially if you need to get your own house in order, right? Like
Right.
it would
Right.
look really awkward right now. And I say that like awkward is the probably the best of words that I could subscribe to this if the Boy Scouts of America started spitting out messages like that, because we all know that their house is not in order. And so
Right.
if they need to fix the problems within the organization and what they're doing, and a lot of companies are like that, right? And so
Right.
people are now demanding to see receipts, both employees and consumers. And by receipts, I mean, well, what does your executive board look like? What does your board of directors look like? For startups, who are you hiring and how? For like, I'm in the business events industry, so for us, what a big thing or the receipt is, how many speakers are you having from different backgrounds and different experiences, and also are those speakers of different backgrounds and experiences, are diverse speakers only talking about diversity? Because that's not only what they talk about. Of course we have, I mean, I'm talking to you, the thrifty marketer, right? We have people across everywhere that have very specific sets of skills and knowledge and expertise, and we need to do the work that kind of goes back to the journalist, right, of doing the research to find those people and
Right.
elevate them and give them the opportunities. And so what I would say is, especially in line with Mark, don't worry more about the like communications, those press releases, what you're going to say on social media. I think the biggest thing for startups and small to medium businesses is to start to make real commitments. That starts within your organization. So what
Right.
am I going to do for hiring? Like, make a commitment that makes you stretch but is obtainable. You want to be challenged, you want to be uncomfortable, but not like outlandishly so that you're never going to hit it, because you want to remain accountable. And if you don't
Right.
hit that goal, I mean, there's some companies right now that are tying executive bonuses and salaries to whether or not they hit those hiring goals. But also too, in the supply chain, who you're getting your materials from. All of that can be challenges and commitments that you're making. And then once you get that started, you can then kind of share that out as a whole, or what you're doing to help the community. The other is, like I said, remaining accountable. You want to be transparent. You want to get, and not like beating your chest of like, hey, we've done all this, but more just like, hey, we said we were going to do this. Here's an update. We've done this. So now we're going to increase it by this much. Now we're going to do this. And then the last thing I would say is get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this whole thing is incredibly uncomfortable to deal with. It is, I think anybody who has somewhat of a conscience is going to feel uncomfortable sitting in a room talking to people who have been given the short end of the stick their whole lives, and hearing about, these problems. And it's also hard to acknowledge areas that you've fallen short. But we're people, and we need to do that. And that's the only way like through it, or the only way past it, is through it, right? And so that's the big thing here. So I completely agree with him. I think the big thing is to like start within and like really start to look at like ways you can, like Guy Kawasaki said, I'll bring up your goal there. You want to make sure you're making purpose along with making money, or making meaning with making money.
Right. I think that's the most complete answer anybody can give on that particular topic. That's the way to go about it. All right. So my questions about communications is over. So I have two more questions. One is about you, and one is serious advice I need from you for all the communication professionals who are starting the journey. So the question number one is, you have immense experience in PR, social media, content, etc., etc. So just take us through your exciting professional journey. What all you have done. You have done so much, So if you can say it in few words, few sentences, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I graduated in PR, and I joke that usually journalists go to what we call the dark side because PR has more money and more opportunities. It's a sad state of affairs, but I don't make the rules. I just live in them. But I actually went the other way. So I graduated in PR, but had a love for journalism and also social media. So I started, branching out and just researching by myself, doing social media and content creation. So I worked for a bunch of organizations, from startups to Fortune 500 companies, working within their communications and social media, as well as, like a boutique PR agency. And then I moved to, like you said, Reagan. So I was editor for PR Daily for a while. And a while meaning many years. And then I went over to start producing events there, and now I'm at an association for professional business events here. We the largest association here, and so in my role now, I develop educational content. So in both our event programming and our courses and content like that for members of the business events industry. So that's, across industries. So it's great. It's great to be challenged. I know you mentioned podcasts before. My podcasts are on a temporary hiatus, especially as I, continue to settle into my new role. And personally, we're finally at the place where, my husband and I have lived through the pandemic in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we are ready to move into a house. And so there's a lot. So I think I want to just say too that to anybody listening, if you are also kind of like feeling burned out and like this whole dumpster fire of continuing 2 years is a lot, it's totally okay. You don't need me to tell you that, but I just want to be another voice that says it's okay, because I think we've all been there or are currently there. And that's where I'm in right now. So I'm just kind of, saying it's okay to not do everything I want to do or everything on my list. And eventually, we get to the Guy Kawasaki level, right? It might take a little bit longer.
Right. I don't know what an exciting professional journey of yours, working across spectrums, various, from startups to Fortune 500, running PR Daily. That's amazing. It's so inspiring, actually. All right. So Mike, one last question before I ask my single question, which I ask every guest. That's my last question before I leave you for the day. My question is, since you're here, I have to ask this. What does it take to be a good communications and PR professional?
So I think the biggest thing that can help make you the best and like most powerful PR and communications pro is business acumen. And that's going to be really attractive, to startup founders and, small, medium business owners. So it's really the goal. What you should aim for is not to be a communicator that knows a little about business, but rather a business professional who intimately knows how to communicate. Because if you're a business professional that intimately knows how to communicate, that will open doors and give you a very rich set of skills to do a lot more, both for your organization, but also your customers, your clients, and the community as a whole. And that's the big thing. I think in the past it was fragmented, where it was all about like, and I still kind of have that, like, how do you get a seat at the table? And now it's like, we're past that. You need to know business so that when you talk, in a bigger organization, it's, when you present to your boss or the CEO or the C-suite, but even too, if you're in a startup, you need to know both the business acumen and also how to communicate and build those relationships. So if you have both of those, and also if you have a healthy love of insights and data, that's
Nothing
like,
it.
mwah, you're going to go even further.
Fantastic. So, my final question, which I ask every guest who comes here, is about COVID, right? So, since I know you, I don't know, I feel like I know you really well because I follow you on every social media channel possible, except TikTok, I guess. Are you on TikTok? Yes, you are on TikTok, but it's banned in India. So,
and I'm only on there a little. It's only a little. Just a little.
Right. So you and Dennis both have one of the best marriage photos I have ever seen is yours. Okay, I love that. I've commented on it 100 times, I believe, because I have this. It keeps on coming on my feed. I keep rating the best photo ever. So that is one thing. So I know you have Dennis, you have Tibbs. So how has COVID-19 been, and how is 2021 going so far?
Yeah, so I also just want to say I got sunburnt so badly during that photo session. Oh man, so badly.
But it came out so well. It's so beautiful.
We had, thank you so much. Thank you. I noticed that Facebook must be reserving that to you because you comment on it.
Right.
Because every so often I see it and it just makes my heart so happy. And you have such cute pictures with your family, and now you have a new golden, and it's like, oh, I feel the same. I could reciprocate and say the same thing. We were lucky with that to have, so one of our friends is a very gifted photographer here in Sweden, and he gave those pictures to us as gifts. So we are very lucky.
Wow.
But COVID, so COVID has it's been an interesting time. 2021 is going pretty well. I mean, I'll share something with you that I shared with somebody else when we talked about this. And I think for me, and I feel too that other people might also be experiencing this. For me, the tough part of COVID, as well as this whole, I don't know how to put like a broad, it's not just like the Black Lives Matter movement, but like the whole kind of like boiling up of the recognition that like maybe we should do something about this systemic racism that's been going on for like several centuries and whatnot. All of that coming to a head at once has been a lot, and I think we've all kind of collectively in a variety of ways and to varying degrees have kind of lived through trauma with it. My biggest thing that kind of weighs on me is more of the ugly part of humanity that showed. And so sometimes that's really rough to look at, kind of, we talk about going to the next, like coming back to normal or this new normal, and like life's just never going to be the same. And it's not even because our economy is not going to be the same, and it's not just because workplaces are forever changed. It's because we now know something about other people that we interface with, whether online or in person, that we probably didn't want to know in some ways. And in other ways, we've also found out like these intimate ways to connect with one another and grow closer. So there is an upside to it as well. And so that's kind of what weighs on me heavily, because it's tough. It's tough to go, okay, we're going to like, woo, like blast forward when you know that there's a large part of the population who's just like, I don't want to get the vaccine. I don't really care. You know, I'm like, I don't really care about you. And like all that kind of stuff. It's hard. It's really hard. But there are some really great things with, I mean, it's exciting to look at like technology and like even user interface and user experience. We're talking about technology that jumped forward a decade within, 8 months. And so it's also this crazy time where some of the best content and some of the best like offerings are being created because of this like disruption is forcing people to innovate fast and innovate really well. And so that's the upside to it as well. And sitting in the middle of all of it helps me. Having Tibbles helps me. Talking to people like you help me. So I think things are looking up, and I hope, maybe someday we can visit, and the borders are going to be open. That would be great. Maybe one day we'll visit, and then you can also visit Guy Kawasaki.
Absolutely, we should do that, and we should go. We should go surfing with him. He surfs a lot, So we should do that.
I'll take pictures of you two doing surfing, and I'll enjoy the beach.
Yeah, one day, absolutely. I've made a list of people who I want to visit before I die. I've made a list.
I love that.
It's a lot of people in the US. So my US trip, whenever it happens, it will be a long trip because I have to cover so many people there. So it's entire US. I will have to spend like 60 days there to meet so many people. So
what's
now
the number up to? Is it like a 50 or is it like 2,000? Like how?
No. I'm not that friendly. Also, I have 25 to 30 folks, who are very close to me, and I wanna meet them before I die. So that's another goal I have. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time out today. It was such a pleasure meeting you, and take care. And obviously, we will be in touch.
Of course. Have a great day. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So that was Becky. She's one of the sweetest people I know. It's very. It's like I don't like Facebook, to be honest with you. I don't like Facebook, but I go to Facebook because I get to get updates from people I love. So I want to talk about something here about the last point which you mentioned, the bad side of humanity. Today morning when I woke up to the pictures of what is happening in Assam. Right? I don't know the political side of it. I don't care. But a person hurting another person is unacceptable. We are not here to hurt others. So I pray to God that the humanity becomes kinder and kinder day by day. And I intend to think about it or do something about it. So I want all of you to stay safe, take care, sanitize your hands, and I will meet you soon with another episode of SMB Talks. Happy weekend.